Brad, thanks for being here in Milan, in our academy. How can you help us teach to our students how to deal with an artist in a working studio environment?
I spent so many years with Michael Jackson and a lot of other artists, but to me, the number one thing, the technology is extremely important, but you're trying to extract a vocal, you're trying to extract a performance from that artist, and that comes down to trust. And the artist has to trust you. They have to know that what you're doing is going to make it sound better, make the performance better. And how you go about that, it's complicated. There's no, quick, simple answer, but you basically become friends with them. It has to. It's a client. They are your client, but they also have to trust you like a friend. And
how you build this trust? How you can say no, for example, to an artist when it's necessary?
Well, there's something that I teach students, and it's funny. We all have cell phones, and it's a simple example, but I'm addicted to my phone, just like you are, and just like everybody in this room is.
You're not alone.
Right. But for example, at our dinner table at home, we have a rule of no phones. The phone gets put away. And as hard as that is, that needs to be the same in a session where 100% of your focus is on that artist and not looking at your Instagram, not looking at YouTube videos. So if the artist feels like they're playing second, like they're not the most important thing at that moment, you're not going to get the best performance. So put the phone down, pay attention to the artist, talk to them, have a conversation with them, and the session's just going to go smoother.
Okay, so how did you change your work with MJ within the years from 85 to 2002?
Well, in a lot of ways, Michael changed me. I was with him from Captain EO through the History album in the recording studio, but then I really learned that I loved building things, and my career kind of made an adjustment. Michael asked me to build his ranch, Neverland Valley Ranch. So I started building music systems, building dance systems, building big scale systems, and he loved it and I loved it. So we sort of have an expression in the U.S. of follow your dream, and I'm not really sure what that means. It's kind of a dumb expression, but I kind of followed my gut. I followed, this is something that I'm really good at. This is something that I know I'm making my client happy, and I love doing it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but my career evolved as a result of working with Michael.
And what's the legacy of this for the recording studio jobs, for people now approaching to a job in the recording industry?
Well, when I talked to the students yesterday, there's a lecture that I do called Studio Etiquette on a Michael Jackson session. And I'll give an example of, I take people through the whole process of how I used to prepare a vocal session for Michael. And there's several steps to that in making the room very comfortable, making it predictable, where if we're working in LA, New York, London, when Michael walks in, it feels the same.
Okay,
and that's
it's standard.
Yep. Artists, creative people like predictability. They don't like surprises. So they like to go in and feel comfortable. And so there's all these steps. And one of the examples I give in my lecture with students is whether I'm working with Michael Jackson or Barbra Streisand or somebody that's doing their very first demo that their mom and dad are paying for, it needs to be treated the same. And if the student can convey that they're that serious, that they're going to treat a brand new singer as if it were Bruno Mars or Taylor Swift or Michael Jackson, that artist is going to want to work with that engineer again and again and again. And that artist is going to tell their friends, this engineer is really serious and he's got a good personality, or she, and takes the work very seriously, and I trust him, and it just comes full circle.
So what's your advice for a junior figure in this industry, a junior professional? Because we know MJ was very prolific, for example, dozens of demos for the same album. I read on Atlantic an analysis of this in 2013. So what's your advice for them?
It's such a different industry than it was. You know, I mean, I started the first time I walked into a recording studio was, I think, 1984. And it's a whole different world. But it still comes down to how you treat that artist. Now, you absolutely have to have the technical chops. You know, you can't just dismiss that, but it takes both. And I sound so old, and I don't mean to sound old. I don't feel old, but we were a little bit spoiled because we didn't have all the distractions of Facebook and Instagram and cell phones and just constantly blurting out social media. We came into the studio and it really was a cocoon. I mean, it was our little world.
Protected environment.
Completely protected. And you wouldn't think of, sneaking a demo out and playing it at a radio station. And now it's different. I mean, artists, their material gets leaked all the time. And it's different. And I'm not saying that we have to go back to the old days. I mean, that's not going to happen. But I think there has to be a little bit of respect for when an artist comes into a studio, they need to feel safe. And as the more the engineer and the production team can create that environment, I think the better it's going to be. Even on a small budget demo, treat it as if it's a world-class album.
It's a precious advice for people, even a small budget. So
yeah,
many artists today have a small budget, so they have to deal with this.
Well, when I talked to students yesterday, there's kind of an example I give. Let's say that I'm going to work with a young artist who, has a really small budget, and mom and dad are paying for it, and, and everyone's kind of nervous. There's little things you can do, like finding out what their favorite type of tea is, or if they drink Evian or orange juice or whatever their thing is. Make sure the studio is clean. Make sure that the bright lights are shut off, and maybe light a couple candles or something, not to make it weird, but to make it comfortable. And so they come in, the first thing they smell is their favorite tea, and they know that you care. And that goes, they don't care. The artist could care less if you've got the latest plug-in and whatever your favorite reverb is. They don't care. They care about how they feel out in that room. And that's your job. Your job is to, the purpose of this is to capture their performance, not to show off your new plug-in. Nobody cares about your plug-in.
It's a good insight. What do you think about the use of voice today in recordings, in the pop industry? For example, the use of auto-tune.
Again, I mean, I'm so old school. We didn't, we had the technology for Michael, and I'm talking about like through the History album. We had some, auto-tune devices, but they were terrible. You've got a singer. What's a singer like to do? They like to sing. And it's the strangest thing to me now that, productions will take, 2, 3, 4 weeks editing vocals and tuning vocals. And I'm like, that's so weird to me. Why not just have the singer sing it and get a live performance? But again, it's a different world, and I know I sound old, but it really needs to go back to the basics of capture that vocal. As far as auto-tuning, of course it's done. It's done by many artists, but as long as it's not overdone, and when you see them live, I mean, people kind of laugh at me. My girls kind of I've got 4 daughters. They kind of turned me on to Taylor Swift. I admit it. I'm a Taylor Swift fan. I went and saw her concert 3 months ago. It was unbelievable. I've got to be really careful how I say this. She's not the same level of entertainer as a Michael Jackson, but the production is unbelievable. And she performs. I mean, she sings the songs. If there's a little bit of help behind the scenes, they do a pretty good job of covering it up. But, you know, the artist still has to show the audience they can do this.
So good for next question, which is, where is the legacy, the soul of Michael in today's artist? Who is your favorite, maybe, or who is your...
I hate this question.
I know, but I'm a journalist, so I'm a bad person.
You know, I'm not going to sit here and say Taylor Swift is my favorite. She, you know, but I love production. And
Okay.
I love
So
when
you gave your technical point.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, having a good songwriting team, a well-produced product, you know, I'm not into, you know, some unknown, and I'm being really careful, but, you know, some unknown little Norwegian artist that plays a ukulele. I mean, it's not my thing. I love pop music. So, yeah, I love some Bruno Mars stuff. You know, there's some Taylor Swift stuff, and I know it's sugary and poppy and everything else. And then I love rock and roll. I mean, I still, you know, I still go back to Pink Floyd and Zeppelin and Van Halen and the stuff that I grew up with. And it's hard to argue with what they did with the technology that they had.
So Michael worked with Scorsese for a great 18 minutes version of Bad after some years, after the success. Who could be something like that today? What could be?
As far as what artist?
Yeah, there are no more rock operas like The Wall,
Yeah, or
for
Queen,
example, or Queen, or Sweets, like A Dark
Well,
Side of the Moon.
yeah. I mean, you know, I think there's an open door there. You know, I think there, you know, as far as talking to your students, I think we do need people that are willing to take chances and, you know, do big productions. I mean, The Wall is a perfect example. I was completely addicted to that album, you know, for years. I mean, that's one of the reasons I got into this industry. Yeah, as far as you know, as far as the short movies, one thing that we've talked about in our seminars is when Michael made the movie Ghosts, which is, it's a really, I worked on that, and it's a 40-minute, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a really unusual, it was an interesting concept for him. And it was kind of Michael without boundaries, where he had a huge budget. He really didn't have a director. I mean, he kind of did, but it was kind of him doing his own thing. And it's got some amazing moments in it, and it's got some other moments that are, you know, a little too scary or a little too not mature enough. And
Okay, the more the freedom you have.
I think it's good for an artist to have a partnership with somebody that can kind of keep them on track. And I think at that point, and I'm not trying to irritate any Michael Jackson fans, but I think at that point, when Michael is just completely running wild, he kind of needs to be pulled back. I think it could have been an amazing product, but it got kind of lost. It got too big.
You also worked with Tom Cruise and Will Smith. Have I read it right?
With who?
Tom Cruise and Will Smith. I read about that. So you worked to create a personal entertaining system. They say in the
with Tom Cruise. I could tell about 19 Tom Cruise stories, and I just can't on camera. I'll try to make this short. So yeah, Michael got me started at Neverland. And once I started doing that, my name started getting passed around. So I started working with Elizabeth Taylor and Helen Hunt and a few different people in Hollywood, Will Smith, Quincy Jones. And I started building bigger and crazier systems for people. That's funny, you know, about Tom Cruise. You want to know the truth? I've never met him. He's the only celebrity that I've done a lot of work for, or I've never even shaken his hand. This is going to be, so I don't know how this is going to come across in translation, but the Church of Scientology, which I'm not a member of, let's be clear about that, they found me and said, wow, you're pretty good at building things. we've got some projects for you. And so I started doing project after project after project for them. And I wound up doing 2 motor coaches, and I did Tom's G4, his Gulfstream jet. And then I did some work at his house.
Anyway, what's your favorite story about the 18 years with Michael Jackson?
Man.
The moment that best describes your relationship.
I mean, there's so many. During the Dangerous album, when you're on a big album, there's a lot of downtime. You know, when maybe, you know, we used to use an old Neve 8078, big old board, and the board would always have problems. And so we'd have a tech in there working on the board. And so there's downtime. And so we had a kitchen, and I loved to cook. So I'd be in the kitchen, and we had restaurants, we had all the food you could want, but I still enjoy cooking. And so we started making hot wings. And this was in 1990, and hot wings were kind of a big deal in the US, and and it was catching on. Everybody was big into hot wings. And so we're just making these wings just as hot as you can I mean, I like hot food, but we were making them just stupid. And Michael would try every one. And I kept thinking in the back of my mind, if I make this guy sick, you know, that's bad for the project, you know. But that's how tight we were. That, you know, I didn't go clubbing with him. I didn't go to restaurants. You know, we weren't best friends, but he trusted me. And that kind of comes back to how this whole thing started. Whether it's setting up a microphone or making a hot wing or whatever, we had that level of trust where he knew I was going to take care of him.
Which one do you think is your biggest contribution, technical contribution to his recordings?
You know, I always make it very clear. Bruce Swedin did all the mixing. So I did not mix these projects. I was more behind the scenes, but there's a few things, you know, like the rap on Black or White, Bill Bottrell, you know, I recorded that. There's certain things that give in to me. I recorded a lot of that. Who Is It? Quite a bit of that. There's things that I know I did, and I don't have to, you know, put a big red arrow on it and say that was recorded by Brad. But it was a really cool team, and throughout the years, yeah. And the nice thing is, I mean, next month we're going to be in LA, and almost the whole team we're still friends. And after all these years, that means a lot to me, that we didn't just stab each other in the back and this guy's
It's a competitive industry. So.
It is. And at the end of the day, and I'm not bragging, but I think Michael was very careful about the people that he surrounded himself with, and we cared for him and we care about each other. And after all these years, we're still friends.
You started as an office boy, doing little tasks.
I love that. In the U.S.,
that's what I read. I tried to study.
No, it's fine. A runner. So in the U.S., it's called a runner. I'd clean toilets. I'd sweep the floors. I went to a recording school. We didn't have SAE back then, but I went to a school in Hollywood, and that's where I learned the basics. And I think that's really important. I think to understand signal flow and understand, you know, how an equalizer works, how a compressor works, and why different compressors sound different than other compressors. So I had kind of those basics, but my first job at Westlake, I was getting cheeseburgers and vacuuming the floor and cleaning headphones. That's what I did. How
did you manage to go beyond this, from delivering pizza to contributing?
Back then it was a bit of what I call an apprentice industry, where you had to start at the bottom and work your way up. And I don't think it's changed too much. And I know I keep saying the same word, but Michael trusted me. And even when it was something as simple as making his tea or, you know, bringing him his food, I knew how to act around him. You know, I wasn't taking a bunch of selfies, and we didn't have selfies back then, but I wasn't, you know, can you sign this? I mean, you know, there's kind of a certain cool. You know, you have to have a little bit of decorum. And so I knew how to act around him. And he liked me. I made him laugh. He made me laugh. They started the Bad album, and they asked me if I wanted to sit in the back and watch. And that's what I did. And if Bruce needed coffee, I got him coffee. If Michael was going to sing, I helped him with his headphones. That's how it started.
What do you think about the evolution of formats and the way to deliver the music? For example, the streaming industry.
Oh,
what's the future of this?
I don't know. I mean, it's been rough. And again, I was spoiled because we were there at a point when we really were selling a hard product. You know, we were selling vinyl, we were selling cassettes, we were selling CDs.
You touch that.
Yeah, and it's changed a lot. It's, you know, it's difficult. You know, there's some amazing projects out there. I know that, you know, artists do get paid per stream, but it's, you know, pennies compared to what it used to be. But it's a different world. You know, the artists have to adapt. And that's partly why, you know, and I love these guys, but a lot of these bands, you know, they're in their 60s and 70s, and they're still touring because they have to. You know, they're not making the money on hard product anymore. Yeah. So they have to sell 4,000 tickets, you know, to a venue and hopefully sell, you know, several hundred T-shirts. And it's a job, and it's probably a harder job. You know, I wasn't in the industry in the 70s, but, you know, you can only imagine, you know, with Fleetwood Mac and different bands, they put a record out and everybody buys it and the money just comes pouring in. And it's different now. The artist has to be a little bit smarter and think a little bit faster and, you know, figure it out.
But touring is still the most important part of their job, maybe.
I think it is a very important part, especially for, you know, for bands that are a little bit older. They have to get out there and tour. For a younger artist, well, I mean, I've never worked with Ariana. I've heard that she's amazing. I've actually heard really good things about how she is to work with in the studio. But man, she gets out there and works. I mean, none of this is going to come easy. You know, if you're an artist, if you're a programmer, if you're an engineer, it's not just sit back and make money. You've got to think and get out there and do something better than the guy sitting next to you can.
I guess there are bands asking you some advice about the industry, how to become famous, how to record a better product. What they ask you?
There's not that many that ask me, but I'll answer the question anyway. I would say, and we talked about this a little before we started talking, but don't cut corners. That goes for the artist, that goes for the engineer, that goes for the production team. Don't cut corners. You know, you know what the product should sound like. And Michael's such a unique example, but he was a workaholic. I mean, there's no other word for it. He would practice and practice and practice and practice, and it just wouldn't stop. If we were gonna do vocals with Michael today, if vocals were gonna start at 4 o'clock, he would have been here at 2 o'clock warming up for 2 hours. That's the kind of self-discipline that if you really want to make it to the top, again, I know, you know, Taylor Swift, people kind of snicker and go, oh, it's just Taylor Swift. You know what? She works her butt off, and none of this came easy for her. And it does take hard work and discipline.
What's your opinion about a talent show, for example, as a way to start a career?
Oh, wow, that's a great question, because I've actually written about that a little bit, and we didn't even talk about that. So like American Idol and things like that. I think when they first started, I think it was a really interesting springboard where an artist could go on and kind of get, you know, discovered, and there were some really interesting artists that came out of that environment. Unfortunately, I think I don't watch shows like that very much, but I think people love familiarity, and people love to hear their favorite old song, you know, with a young artist singing it. So as a show, I think those kind of shows are great for the family to be watching TV and, eating popcorn and, oh, remember this song was playing when your mom and dad were dating. But as far as, the artist really bursting out of that bubble and making a name for themselves, it's hard. Not saying it can't happen, but so it's not that I don't like the shows. I just like them for the entertainment value that they give, not so much the springboard to help
For a
launch.
career, yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult. But I mean, man, now you've got YouTube, you've got every different, venue of getting your product out to people's hands. But where do you even start? It's difficult. And, a friend of mine, Brian Vibert's in LA, I mean, he's getting more into, he's an amazing engineer. He's a 6-time Grammy engineer. But he's getting more and more into kind of, building clients. And he and I have, not clients, but artists. And he and I have talked about, how do you get them in front of so many people? It's challenging.
Okay, so that's the teaching part for young people. They must stay in front of of their audience and become good at playing in front of others.
There's an
actual audience.
I will not say the name because I don't want to get myself into trouble. But I'll just say there's a band in Florida, and they produce these songs, and they're not bad. They're actually pretty good productions, but they don't perform live, and I don't think they're capable of it. I think it's all done in the studio, and I think there's so much auto tuning and fine tuning and everything, and that'll only get you so far. You might build a little fan base of people that like your videos and your songs, but at some point you got to get in front of an audience and you've got to do it. And when people can't do that, then I question why they're even in this industry.
So you must teach aspiring artists to perform.
I think
and
so.
Michael was the greatest performer in the history of
right, and he loved it, and he grew up on the stage, and I get all that. But even somebody, I'm not picking on girls at all. I'm a dad of 4 daughters, but a girl might be, she might be a really good guitar player in her bedroom. She might play her guitar and sing some pretty songs. But you tell her, okay, now do it in a coffee shop. Oh, I can't do it in front of 20 people. Well, you've got to. You've got to start there and then build from that and build from that. I mean, if all you ever want to do is play the guitar in your bedroom, that's great. That's fantastic. But you're probably not going to sell a lot of records.
How was Michael with the piano or other instruments?
He could, we call it noodling. He could play a couple notes, but he was not a pianist. He was not he's gotten, I think, a couple of credits for playing guitar. He could strum a guitar, but he couldn't play. He didn't need to. We got Steve Lukather on speed dial. We can get any artist that we want to come in and play the part. But I mean, he could, his voice was the magic. He could beatbox. I mean, he could sing any instrument he wanted, and then it was our job to take that roadmap and get real musicians to fill it in.
So what's the best of this magic? Your favorite vocal part of Michael's works? I'm probably going to go with Stranger in Moscow. I mean, the emotion in that vocal, the purity of it. Actually, there's one other. I take it back. There's a song that I did not work on, and it's a song that MJ fans know, but a lot of non-MJ fans haven't really heard, from the E.T. storybook, called Someone in the Dark. And it was before I met Michael, but his age and the quality of his voice right at that point, I think he was around 19 or 20 years old, I think, is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So Someone in the Dark is probably one of the purest vocals I've ever heard from him. Very interesting. There was instead a song he was quite tired of. Uh,
That he was tired of? I'm being completely honest. I never heard him complain about a song or having to perform a song or
too many times, maybe.
I mean, honestly, he didn't complain that much about anything. It was just the opposite. He was extremely grateful. You know, I mean, his schedule was crazy and the touring and everything else, but I never once heard him say, "Oh man, I got to go to Tokyo and do the concert." I mean, he'd be excited, and I think he really thrived on it.
He was born for this.
Yeah, absolutely.